Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's interview, webinar, conversation. It's the first of our series for the fall, Learning from Liaisons, where we'll be talking to a different liaison and their partners and their staff every week. And the topics will range across evictions, what's happening right now with COVID, ARP strategies, and more. So just a little bit of background for those of you who may be new to Schoolhouse Connection. We are a national organization working to overcome homelessness through education. We will not belabor all of the resources that we have for you there, but lots of information on our website and in our newsletters in terms of future programming. We're not going to use the PowerPoint for much of this. This is an interview style, but we, if you do want the PowerPoint, because we do have resources on the last couple of slides that could be useful with lots of good hyperlinks. So that will be in the handouts folder. We will archive all of these recordings so that they will be available for future listening and learning. And if you have a question, again, this is a real opportunity to do a deeper dive rather than having a panel to do a deeper dive into how a specific community and a specific school division is addressing homelessness. So if you have comments or questions, please put those in the Q&A frame as well. I do want to say just a little bit before we introduce today's guest speaker that we're doing this format. It worked well last spring to have sort of one-on-one conversations. We know everybody's sort of zoomed out with lots of webinars. So this is a good opportunity. And we were thinking about sort of the topics, and really there are a lot with COVID right now. Evictions, obviously the top of mind for a lot of people, but also the new opportunities that we have more generally to address child and youth homelessness through the American Rescue Plan. So we'll be talking about that topic as well. We reached out to state coordinators early on to say who are people who are really engaged in this so that we could jumpstart and really seed a larger national conversation. So throughout this series, we'll have a range of geographies. We're also really hoping to learn from you, our participants. So please let us know what you're up to in the chat box and also at the end. The way we're going to do this is it's just going to be a 30-minute conversation, and then the last 15 minutes will be Q&A. So with that, I am very happy to introduce Melora Horn, who is the McKinney-Vento Program Coordinator from Roanoke City Schools in Virginia. Welcome, Melora. How are you today?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much, Barbara.
Could you just tell us a little bit about your school district and your role within the school district?
Yeah, so, well, first of all, I met Barbara in 2003. So she's been a great stability for myself and just this journey. But I started working for Roanoke City Schools in 2003. At that point, they were receiving McKinney-Vento funding, but had not really developed a regular full-time coordinator position or anything. So I got to actually start from the beginning, which was really cool, and to grow with this program. So have been here quite a long time. We have a student population of probably about 13,500 students. So we're an area, you know, in Roanoke City, so an urban school division with about a very high, I'd say probably 80% or a little bit higher for free and reduced lunch. We've grown our program, like I said. I have about 5 part-time staff and planning to grow the program more and more, especially now with some of our additional funding that we're going to be receiving for the first time ever, so in this capacity.
That's fantastic. What are, just as we're now kind of well into the back to school's been in session now for a bit, what are 1 or 2 trends that you're seeing locally as school returns, both in terms of families who you're identifying as homeless, but also those who are at risk of eviction or in the process of eviction? What does that look like for you right now locally? Just briefly, so that when we talk about strategies, people will have a sense of what you're seeing.
Yeah, so I think at this point, you know, we're kind of still waiting for the big storm to hit. I mean, like everyone else, you know, we know it's going to come eventually. And right now I'm starting to see, you know, phone calls because people are getting evicted, like just trickling, you know, not like I was anticipating at this point, of course, but starting to see some of those. And also, I think the biggest thing is that my staff and I were talking about this recently. As we know with this pandemic, you know, you have families that are experiencing homelessness. That's already traumatic for them. But on top of that, because of this pandemic and what it's done to everyone, we see even additional frustrations, higher emotions, more so than normal. So really trying to be prepared to handle and understand that we are going to have to navigate through this with our families, especially as we see more evictions coming, you know, that's going to be happening or whatever.
So Laura, another question that I want to ask you, what are some of the main actions and/or partnerships that you've been using to help families prevent evictions, connect families to emergency rent relief, and connecting families and youth to homeless assistance?
So probably back in, I think it was about 2015, our school division started this incredible fundraising effort, and it was started, which I know this Barbara will find this very exciting as well, but it was a response from some of our high school students who noticed the number of homeless youth that we have in our school division, and at that point was like, wait a minute, I could be sitting beside my peers who are experiencing homelessness. I never really thought about that. And really, our two high schools pulled together and said, we want to do something to help our peers and other families experiencing homelessness. So we started doing our own fundraising. We've had a couple events. Of course, they've been scaled back right now because of the pandemic, but we have raised a lot of money. And so to date, we have actually contributed $50,000 to our local COC, and we actually have our families access that money through this central intake entry point, so that when they are facing evictions, they know that if it's a family that has children in Roanoke City Schools, after they have utilized their other resources, because we want to help fill in the gap where it's more difficult to get those services, they will send me a referral. We do some reviews, and then we most always would, you know, obviously approve that funding. And then also on the flip side of that, when we have our current McKinney-Vento families that are close to finding housing or they're ready to start, we make sure that we connect them that way as well and let them know that we can help them in addition to whatever central intake or other services can help.
And Laura, I remember when we spoke a couple of weeks ago, you told Barbara and I about how you've also been collaborating in the community to find and track available apartment units for families. So I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about that as well.
So one of the things that I started thinking about when, you know, I was sitting at my desk one day and I was like, you know, we're going to have all of these families being evicted potentially. And when we do, what kind of impact is that going to have on our schools, depending on where they live? So both sides of that, meaning you're going to have a lot of children that might be moving from one complex, and if we have that school of origin, you're going to have all these other schools start absorbing maybe a whole lot of new students at one time and preparing for that. So, and then also just knowing what that looked like in our community. And so I sat down one day, made a list of all the different affordable housing complexes, obviously worked really closely with our housing authority locally, and just started making phone calls and asking questions. Anyone that knows me well knows I'm a question box, and I love to ask questions and try to figure out things. And so I really just, you know, put a list together and started making phone calls and asking, you know, this is what I do. I just want to make sure we're prepared. And also on the other side of that was to be able to make sure families facing evictions had all those resources there they could share with them about our program and other community resources. It was a really, it was a great experience because number one, I developed some new relationships. Number two, I personally found out that a lot of our community partners, especially affordable housing, and, you know, they have smaller units. I mean, they have a lot of apartments, but it's not as large necessarily as some of ours that are income-based and through public housing. And they had almost zero. I think the highest one said we may have about 5 pending evictions, but we're good. And I said, well, you know, that's awesome. And helping me to understand how are those numbers lower. And you know, this is honestly, I was talking to Barbara about this too. I'm a firm believer in relationships, conversations. Sometimes we feel uncomfortable asking questions, but we have to get uncomfortable to get a lot of things accomplished together. So this is really looking at, you know, some of my own thoughts. Maybe it's the relationship they have with them. Maybe it's a level of trust that our families have. And I think that's a big key, because when we looked at the amount of, I guess, potential evictions through the housing authority, and I can give you an update on that in a little bit too, but initially that number was a lot higher. And when I asked the question, obviously there's funding there to help, why is that number so high? And the response I got was, it was a lot of the parents were unwilling to sign the necessary paperwork because they did not trust they would not have to pay the money back. And I think that speaks volume, because you can't force someone, you're not going to coerce someone, but on the flip side, it's very sad to think, because of that level of trust and the experiences they've had, that they're literally willing to be evicted versus to get financial assistance that could prevent that from happening.
Can you tell a little bit about the relationship that you then developed and some with the Public Housing Authority in terms of posters and sort of to try to deal with those issues of distrust that which we know are centuries in the making?
Right. So I have one contact in particular that we're kind of, she's kind of my liaison, and we've been spending a lot of time trying to, just going back and forth and communicating. That's been very helpful to develop that relationship with that person. I can tell you that this person, she went above and beyond, okay? And I commend her, because she really, helped me to try to collect this information pretty quickly. So some of the things that we did, I took 2,000 of our brochures to the Housing Authority, to their main office. And what was really something I learned, I don't know if they do this everywhere, but navigating through this, at first I said, well, for those that are facing eviction, could you give them one of our brochures? And she's like, well, we would have to give them to everyone, and I said, okay, that's fine. So I brought a large number, and she said that they actually send out monthly invoices, and I didn't know that. So they put one of our brochures in every single one of their invoices they were sending out towards the end of May. And then the other brochures, I asked her if she could start giving those upfront to anyone who signs a lease, because something may happen. They are going to know other people that may need that service. And so this has been a kind of a new thing for me, as far as just giving that number of brochures to keep on hand. And then also offering, I asked her, down to the point of, at first she was like, well, these are the number of evictions. And I'm like, is there any way you could tease out how many of those actually are people who have children, not just single adults, which that was asking a lot for her to do, but she helped me with that. Because telling me that you might have 500 evictions, not that we don't care, but how many of those include children and families, and not single people as well? So that was some of the things that we really were able to work through together, to the point that she actually was able to give me the number of pending evictions for each one of their localities. And that helped a lot, because then I can then prepare, knowing that number is going to help me prepare those schools in that particular attendance zone or receiving zone, as we see people move, what might be changing there as well.
Okay, thank you so much for that, Melora. So just to change gears a little bit, going to the American Rescue Plan Act funds, I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about your plans for using these new funds, and also general ESSER K-12 funds to meet the identification, enrollment, attendance, and other needs of families and youth experiencing homelessness in your school district.
Okay, thank you for that question, because this is, like I said, I have really tried to find the positive, out of all this funding that we're getting, and it's because of a terrible situation that's happened, to our world. But at the same time, I am looking at it saying, okay, people are now starting to see what we're seeing and have been seeing and dealing with for many, many years, and trying to help our families navigate. So up until this point, even as we speak today, I am the only full-time person in our program. And, we're based on our McKinney-Vento funds, our Title I set aside. So we're kind of doing the best we can, like everyone else. For the next few years with this ARP HCY money, Dr. Pop in for the state of Virginia, our homeless coordinator, she said to all of us liaisons, I need you to think big. I need you to tell me what is it that you want, and let's just see what we can, how we can make this happen. So that really helped me to be able to look at some of our needs. So one of the things is taking some of my part-time staff, making them full-time, having an opportunity to offer them that because I need that, and I want them to have that for themselves as well. To give you a little bit of what I do have in place, I have a program outreach specialist. So I would like to make that position full-time, and that person is responsible for helping me identify students, taking the referrals, and also making sure our families are connected to resources and all kinds of resources, whether it be food resources or, there's clothing needs, school supplies. And then for our families, often they don't have, there's a barrier of transportation. So she delivers these to these families. So, and then we have, I have another person who is a person who manages all the data. So she is really helpful in the sense that she keeps all of us together and all of this information. And so looking at some of those needs moving forward, we know what chronic absenteeism looked like before the pandemic hit for McKinney-Vento students. So I don't think any of us expected it to look any different, and we knew that it would look worse. But in planning of that, it's like, what is it going to take, for us to, and I think this is the hardest thing that I've had to learn, because when you have things that you think will work, and we have these dreams, we also have to keep in mind that we can't be hard on ourselves when these things don't work, but we have to be willing to go back and not give up and keep doing it, because that's what we need, I think, to be able to meet those goals that we have. So the things we're looking at is, of course, what are some additional things and supports we can put in place to really help our students with increasing the chronic absenteeism. And so with McKinney-Vento, for our school division, we typically run probably, I would say, 15, 14%, well, not 14%, I'm sorry, probably close to like 30 or 40%. In some cases above our general student population. So this past year with the pandemic, our numbers were a lot higher. And so we always are doing constant follow-up. I think that's the biggest thing that we have to continue doing. So right now, what I have in place is, we do follow-up calls on a regular basis, but after a few times, like 3 times, if we're not able to get a call back, or the phone is no longer working, of course, we're working with the school, but we're also reaching out to our people that, our school social workers, the people that are monitoring attendance. They're out there in the community. And I think that, we always say we don't want to work in silos, and we need to really be coming together. But I think we all get so focused on what our responsibility is that we do have to stop and remember that. Because I have to remind myself of that. Oh, I could call this person and ask them to help me. So I think that those are the things that are going to continue to help us to find success. But some of the things that we're looking at also is, we've tried to better connect our 0 to 5. Being able to connect those children so that we're doing that early intervention. And in addition to that, if you really stop and think about it on a linear, you have children that could be in childcare or some other type of early, pre-K program, and you have the children that you want to, obviously help them be successful in their current school placement. And when you're really trying to come together and look at that family as a unit and where can I connect? What I see is parents that are, okay, oh my gosh, you've got this program for my kids. Now I'm able to actually be able to go to work again, or have that stability for myself and my children, because that's what's going to lead to them eventually getting into, permanent and stable housing. And then on the other side, how can we better help our unaccompanied youth? Constantly wanting to figure out things that we can do to support them. So some of our money, we are kind of building a parent resource area where we're located right now. And we are currently in a church, and we rent like the 3rd floor, and we have such great support here. And this church does a lot of outreach for other homeless populations. So we have an area that, you know, we're trying to create a space that it's on the bus line. So it's really easy to get here from both of our high schools or middle schools. And, you know, for students to be able, obviously during the pandemic, this would be something we set up individually, but have a safe place for them to come. They can have tutoring here. They can have something to eat. We even have a place where they could, you know, take a shower, have a snack, or take a nap. I mean, you know, we're just really trying to take the money that we have, that we have never had before, and really try to do all those things we've been wanting to do for such a long time, and to continue moving in that direction.
So it sounds like you're going to be increasing staff time for outreach and identification. Did I understand you're increasing staff time for specific outreach on both the early side and the unaccompanied youth side as well?
Yeah, well, that's one of the plans, is once we can better, we have a Smart to Start application. I don't know if you're familiar, if that's something that's everywhere, but it really has been a great way for our families, where we have people at the table. So, you know, now we have a liaison, a person that we're working with for our central office, that goes to this committee and can honestly sit down and kind of go through all of these student applications that they have. And we give them the list of all of our McKinney-Vento families, so they know this child, this person who has applied for 0 to 5 programming, this child is currently experiencing homelessness. So to really try to expedite some of those. So yes, Barbara, I really want to build on that more in the next couple of years, and also with our like our older youth too, having someone that can. Ultimately, I would love to be able to, I have a part-time position also for a family support specialist, and that currently is not filled. Someone left, but I'm going to work on, you know, putting that back together and possibly making that full-time as well.
Great. Okay, we got some great questions. Before we get to questions, though, we have a commercial advertisement, and then we'll get to the questions that are waiting for you in the chat box.
Okay, thank you.
So getting my screen to come up, but in the meanwhile, I just want to turn everyone's attention to some of the links that are in the chat box. They are where we have some eviction related resources, and also some specific ARP HCY resources, which are right here too. Maybe technical difficulties, but just in case you want to learn a little bit more about the resources that might be available in your community related to eviction prevention or legal aid, I advise everyone to check out these links. They're also going to be included in the PowerPoint. So once you access it after the webinar is over, the PowerPoint will be sent to you, and you'll be able to access all of these links and other ones that also lead to the website of the Department of Ed.
So I'm going to jump, while Alian's working on the technical, I'm going to go ahead and get into the questions, because there are some great ones. So Melora, there's a question about the private funds that you have going through the COC to help families that you identify who need housing assistance. And this is about sort of when the funds that they privately raised were turned over to the COC, did the folks who use them have to meet the HUD definition, or are they able to serve under the broader education definition? We all know this is a huge issue. So education.
Yeah, and I love that question, and I really appreciate that being asked. That's the beauty about this money. This is our money. It's unrestricted funds, and we are serving our families that meet the McKinney-Vento definition, not just the HUD definition. That was one of the things that we really wanted to be able to do.
So they didn't have to go through the whole HUD coordinated entry process. It was a simple referral from you to the school district to this fund where they could access and get help.
Yeah, so what happens is they would be referred to central intake with the COC, and they would first find out what they were eligible for, and then they would send us a referral for things that they still didn't have enough funding from other places because of restrictions or because they didn't meet certain criteria. I hope that answers that question.
I think so. We'll see if someone asks that. So basically, it's a way for you to kind of do a work around some of the yes. And this is specifically for families and youth that you're identifying through the school district.
Exactly. They have to be children in our school division.
Great. And here's another question too, which is just about your plan to use ARP. Would it be to rent space within the church building that you're typically using to expand your services?
We already do, and so this we use the money that we use to rent this space comes from our Title I set aside. So actually, the ARP money would be used more to offer those services and have those resources available. And then along with that, my plan is to have someone who can specifically work with our unaccompanied youth. And that money would be used through the ARP.
So you have the space, but the ARP is going to add the resources and the personnel to this space.
Yes.
In terms of the 50K that does, this is circling back to the previous topic about the money for housing assistance. What does it primarily get used for? What's like the most typical use of that fund?
The money is used for the money is used to prevent evictions. So if there's someone who has children in Roanoke City Schools, it can be used for that when they've tapped out everything else. It's used to rehouse. It can be used for utility cutoffs, anything that's relating to housing. Now, I will say this, I think the beauty also of having this money is being flexible. And so there are certain things that I also will pay for through this fund that I don't necessarily announce, but I want to be able to have it based on that specific situation of what that family is experiencing. So with that being said, we have also used that money to help pay for storage units when people were at risk of losing everything, including all of their belongings. We've used it for hotels where no one else will help in the community with usually, I mean, there are some, but it's not something that people can just go and get assistance. I try to use that money, and our priority would be for domestic violence situations, to have a safe place for them if they can't get into a local shelter, and also for families who've experienced house fires and they've ran out of resources through the Red Cross. We utilize that. You have to be careful though, because if you put out there and make it well known, hey, we're using this money to help for hotels, you're not going to be able to serve all the people that are going to want to tap into that. So what I like to look at is if someone is already paying for a hotel and then they go through maybe a spot where they call and say, is there any resource that can help us for the next week or so? Then we kind of evaluate that and we might help them as well. But you do have to put limitations. And like, for example, you have to have guidelines like, okay, we've helped you with this. This is the only time we can help you in this calendar year, or whatever your guidelines are. But I think that's important, especially when you start using unrestricted funds, so that you can help as many people as possible instead of having the same person maybe come back and tapping into different resources.
Well, we know there's billions of unspent emergency rental assistance dollars, and that's going to be a focus of future sessions. In fact, next week, the two sessions that Alian has teed up on the screen there, which we'll talk about. But so it's a question of making sure that these funds are used to fill holes, but not to let other systems off the hook either.
Yes, and thank you for saying that, because we can have a whole nother webinar just about that, because that is something that we make very clear in our partnerships and collaborations, that we are not using this money for something that is not already available to our families and should be, but this is really to supplement and support them with things they don't have access to.
Right. One question that's coming back to staffing, and then one about fundraising, which is how, prior to ARP, how many people were part of your team? Like how many FTE?
Just me. I'm the only FTE, and I've only been the only FTE. I've had part-time staff, and for us, part-time is going to be 29 hours or less a week. And so if I had 4 people working or 5 people that are on payroll that can work, all of those are part-time, except for myself.
And can you tell a little bit about the fundraisers? Like, how did you, the $50,000 and the fundraising that went into that?
So we did this really cool event. That was all. So from what I was telling you with the students, they created what's called the Star Council. and the Star Council, the Star, because if you know anything about Roanoke, we have the big Roanoke Star. And so they really use that it's STAR stands for Students Taking Action in Roanoke, and it's called the Star Council. So they came together and they came up with different fundraising activities and ideas. So what we've been doing for the past few years is our Breakfast with Santa. And so we have that at the beginning of December. And it's, you know, I've been on other boards and that we have had fundraisers. And I think when you do something, you know that first year is going to be kind of hard to get everything going and get information out there. But then usually you're going to start seeing an increase in the money that comes in, that second and third, somewhere in the middle of that. And it's just been very successful for us. And it's a nice time for anyone to come and just kind of forget about all the other stuff that's going on for an hour or so. And what's been really amazing is every single bit of the food we outsource for our food services, and they donated and prepared all of the food. And so when we said we had 100%, you know, of the profits came to our Help the Homeless Fund, that's how that happened. So it's really about having those relationships in your school division, but also in your community.
And those obviously just went from it didn't go through a district accounting office, in other words, because you were able to have it just be privately raised.
Yeah, so it was raised, but then when you work for a school division, it goes through, the money is kind of, when I say oversee, it goes to our educational foundation for our school division. Yeah, and then, but as far as the money being spent, you know, those approvals come through my office, and then that's how we keep up with everything that way. And so we just, like, I request a check, like I have an amount of money that I say to the central intake, you know, continuum of care, when our balance, plus we get a balance sheet, we know how much we have, but when our balance gets to a certain amount, I go ahead and request additional money so that we make sure that we have money and don't run out, because you could just get us, you know, several referrals in one day. So that's how we do that part.
I'm flipping around here. The question back to your identification processes for identifying, actually two that are related to that. One is specifically, if you could be more specific about how you use the eviction data to determine who was a family and who was a single adult.
Oh, that was information that actually the housing authority gave to me, because they sent out and had each one of their property managers review the pending evictions, and then they're the ones that were able to say, okay, we have 6 pending evictions from this apartment complex, and they do have children they're in Roanoke City Schools. So that's how we got the information, but that's the work they did. They reviewed that for us, and so that they were giving us an accurate number.
And then in terms of the identification that happens within school buildings, who identifies within the school buildings?
So basically the identification process for our school division, it is, everything comes through my office. And you know, some people have different things set up, and some things work better for others. I do feel that it's really important that if you have points of contact in different school buildings, that you have to be really careful that, you know, everything is staying objective. And I just feel that us having a central location where we're the only ones that are making that determination, I think it helps keep it consistent, and it really works well for our school division. And also, I know that people in the schools, everybody has so much work to do and so many things that they're responsible for. And we are fortunate that we do have the funding and we have a full-time program. So not everyone can have that. And I understand that sometimes it's someone wearing, you know, a hat of many different jobs. But I would say if you have the capability, you know, and how we have it set up though, anyone who comes into one of our schools to enroll a child who does not have a proof of residency, a lease, or a mortgage, we ask them to refer those to our office, and then we have conversations. And that way you're not having a person that's standing in front of the school in a front office having confidential conversations. You're being respectful of just not prying, you know, into their lives right there on the spot. And we try to, we work through the conversations that we have with our parents and guardians and caregivers or unaccompanied youth, because we want to be respectful to them and keep in mind that a lot of our families are having people ask them questions over and over and over. And I feel that there is, you really have to work through and figure out what works best. But that is something that I would recommend everyone keep in the back of your mind, asking them permission to have this conversation with them. You don't know what just happened before they walked in the school building. You don't know what just happened or what they're experiencing before you called them. So I think with the identification process, Barbara, going back to what you asked, once we screen them, it might just be a kinship care, or it may be there's another situation that it's obviously not McKinney-Vento. So anything that's not McKinney-Vento, then we let the school know we've screened we've screened the referral, and that we send that up to our school counseling department, who oversees enrollments for everything other than McKinney-Vento, to make sure that we're all on the same page. We keep track of those. The data person that we have, I was telling you, she's our lead program assistant. She keeps a track. We want to know how many referrals do we get that are McKinney-Vento, that are not McKinney-Vento. I like to know where the referrals come from. And I think that if you're not doing that and you have a large number of McKinney-Vento students, or even if you don't, but really knowing where your referrals come from, that's what's going to help you know, who do I need to reach out to more? Because obviously the school counselors, they have it down, or this organization knows when to call us. So I feel like that's something that helps, that's very helpful as well.
Thank you. One more question, and then we're going to talk about what's on tap for next week and share some resources. With the referral processes that you're describing, how long does the process typically make? So what is the length, the way that you're describing the identification process? How long does it typically take?
It's pretty fast. So how I have it set up is we have our own, I have a separate email just for our referrals from our school. That's internal. So that's just for so everybody in the school division that has a situation that they feel like needs to be reviewed, they send that through that email. And the turnaround, unless we've got some barriers of not being able to get in touch with families, or we need to set up something, to help with, a translator, it's within, we don't have very many that don't have a response by the end of the day. It's very fast turnaround. But I also have it set up so that one person is overseeing all of those referrals. But also that's a shared mailbox. So all of my staff can see those referrals coming in. And that's what I really liked about that, because I tend to get a whole lot of emails, or I did get a lot of referrals and phone calls. So it really helps to cut down on the call volume in our office, because we're making a lot of calls out, to have conversations with parents. And it also helps to give you time to just do a little bit of a review yourself. You probably, for families that we've worked with in the past, we already have a history, but it gives you a chance to do some research too. And if it's a student, even if they're not enrolled right now, they may have been in your school division before.
Thank you. And I lied about the last question, really one more question, which is, there's a question about hotel stays and doing that, paying that with the ARP funds. Now, my understanding is you're not doing that. You're using right now hotels with the privately raised funds, but just for the general audience, with the ARP, American Rescue Plan, Homeless Children Youth Funding, it is permissible, unlike regular McKinney-Vento funds, to pay for very short emergency, short-term stays, which are intended to bridge to a longer solution.
Yes.
So a couple of days in a hotel, and different districts are figuring that piece out. But that did remind Ali and I were just sort of slacking behind the scenes about something, Malor, that you said in our previous conversation that I want to make sure we get to before we close. Go ahead, Ali, and you can ask about this piece.
Oh, sure. So I remember you mentioning to us that there's an extended stay hotel in Roanoke that families often go to, and there was an issue with a family having a lot of back payments to make, and you were able to sort of negotiate lower rents for the family. So I was wondering if you could kind of share with everyone how you were able to do so, like kind of what you had to say to the staff, just in case it might benefit anyone here who's in a similar situation.
Okay. I think that is probably something that you just have to be willing to have those conversations. You have the conversations. This is a hotel a lot of our families tend to use because it has a small kitchen in it as well. And so it's about picking up the phone and calling and saying, hey, we may be able to help here with some of this. That's with permission, obviously, that's given to us by the parent to have that conversation. I have not spoken to any hotel in our area at this point that has not been willing to do something, some kind of discount. I know that one of our families, they had some money that they had already, like you said, they owed already. So it's kind of like, they weren't going to be able to, they had a lot kind of hanging over their head. So we went in and just said, okay, if we pay this, and then what kind of rate can you give me moving forward if we're able to help, for another week or so. So really it's about the conversations. And Barbara, you were talking about with the ARP money, it excited me that for the first time ever, they're recognizing you can use this for a short-term stay. I would, you have to tread carefully with that, right? Nobody really says, they don't give us you can use it a week or 5 days. They say a short term. But the idea would be to help to try to bridge that time. So I think that's conversations you need to have with your prevention services, because a lot of times if we're paying or another agency's paying for someone, it might help to get them housed a little bit faster. So I think those are conversations that you kind of have with all of those people in your community.
And just for everyone's kind of broader awareness in terms of using the funds, if a family is paying for a motel stay, they're on their own, they're not considered eligible by HUD. They're not considered homeless. But if a charity or government is paying, then they are considered HUD. So it's a big workaround around the fact that HUD has a narrower definition, but that is one potential piece of this, is that even a couple of days in the motel that's paid for would then qualify that family for HUD homeless assistance.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you, Melora. There's lots more you have to say, and tools and tricks of the trade. But we promised everyone a short summary here, so we're going to go ahead and Aline, if you could tell us what's on tap for next week and some resources.
Of course. So just a quick advertisement for everyone. So we will be coming back again. This was just the first installment of a series of webinars where, of course, we're going to be sharing more, and we're excited that next Tuesday we're going to be hearing from another part of Virginia, from Richmond Public Schools, and we're going to be having featured guest Erica Schmale, who's the coordinator of the Center for Families in Transition program, and Lauren Boswell, who's the family and student support specialist who works very closely with Erica. So they're both going to be coming to us and sharing some materials and some really great information. And then next week is even more exciting because we actually have not one, but 2 webinars next week. So on Thursday, we're also going to be hearing from Cincinnati Public Schools. We're going to be hearing from the manager of Project Connect, which is the McKinney-Vento program at the Cincinnati Public Schools. And we're going to be featuring Rebecca Beach, who is also going to be sharing some great information like what you heard from Melora today. So if you want to get some more ideas, then I recommend everyone to join us again next week, Tuesday and Thursday. And we're going to have lovely presenters and hosts, Barbara and I, coming again. So we hope to see everyone next week. Thanks for joining us this week.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you very much, Melora.
Thank you for having me. Thank you both.
Bye.
Bye.